Queen Quet, head from the body of the Gullah Geechee Nation and thing like that. The Gullah Geechee Nation, going from Jacksonville, North Kakalaki down to Jacksonville, Florida. So 100 of the Yeti people are cracking teeth like that. So that who we be and thing like that. So today, on zooming in on sustainability, we have a special guest here. But before I bring her onto your screens and into your homes and offices today, I want to acknowledge that today is a very solemn day here in the Gullah Geechee Nation, especially in Charleston, South Carolina. 5 years ago today, we had the assassination and the massacre of 9 native Gullah Geechees in Emmanuel AME. And so we cannot begin this broadcast today without taking a time to take just a moment of silence for all of them. Amen and Ashe. Today, this show is dedicated to the Emmanuel 9. It's also dedicated to Maude Aubrey, who were all natives of this coast. Yes, this coast that you see right behind me. Over the years growing up on historic St. Helena Island, we've had to contend with a number of different issues as people started to build more bridges that got to the Sea Islands. And then they wanted to also build on the Sea Islands various things that would be detrimental to not only our natural environment, but to our cultural community. So that's why also today, I decided I would don our tree of the Gullah Geechee Nation for this broadcast. Most of you who are familiar with the Gullah Geechee Sea Island Coalition, you know that our slogan is something I came up with that is going all over the world now. Huna must take care of the root for heal the tree. And so my thing is always about digging deeper into the soil, into the issue, in order for you to be able to heal. You need to get down to the root causes. And many times that's what grassroots activists do. Well, when we do that type of work, we also run into a lot of legal issues, because usually people who are deep-pocketed or who come to these coastlines, who've been coming to the coastlines for hundreds of years, wanting to live in paradise. Look at it behind me. Wouldn't you want to see that out your window every day? We get it. But the way Gullah Geechees do is, instead of seeing it out our windows, we walk to it. We drive to it. We do whatever it is to get to the water. We don't build in the water and on the water and on the marsh and into the marsh line. But this has been a continued battle to keep off the destructionment and keep up the encouragement of keeping cultural traditions and cultural heritage alive along our coast that is primarily a tourist destination. It is a space that millions of dollars come through and hundreds of thousands to millions of people visit annually. So over the years, I've met a few people as we've tried to balance these issues and keep the environment healthy and safe. And those folks have become part of our Gullah Geechee Sustainability Think Tank. Well, the wonderful thing about it is that think tank brought together some really important minds along our coast that were people that I'd encountered before it existed, and who I'd successfully fought because of work of the Gullah Geechee Sea Island Coalition. We had fought off destruction on this coast many times, and even got some good environmental laws passed. So there's a group here that I've worked with for many, many moons now called SCELP. Started out with a project called SOS, Save Our Small Islands. And that's when the founder, Jimmy Chandler, was alive, God bless the dead. And we fought off destructionment that would have brought bridges over to small hummocks right on the outside of St. Helena for all 100 children with different St. Helena, that'd be all for Edinburgh and anything like that. So here it is that unto this day, SCELP and I have done a lot more work over time. And at one point I wondered, did it still exist? And then I heard from this lady, Amy Armstrong, and anybody whose name has strong in it, I'm all for it. All right. And I heard from her and she was like, hi, Queen Quet, you know, maybe SCELP he can do some things. What are y'all working on? I was like, SCELP still around? Yes. And so ever since that day that I knew it stayed around, it did not die off with the founder. I was so elated and so happy. And so Amy and I have kind of kept on sailing on this coast together ever since to stop seismic gun testing and offshore drilling, and now to even fight against destruction at a place called Bay Point. So Amy, I'm so happy that you are here for us to zoom in today through a legal lens. So how you doing?
I'm doing great, Queen. How are you? Thank you for having me.
You learn it. Yeah, that's all right. That's all right. So how are things in Georgetown with everybody else?
We moved into a new office the end of last week and the beginning of this week, and so we're still behind me is a lot of chaos, and we're getting settled in our new space, but we're doing well up here. And you know, listening to you talk about SOS it brings back a lot of memories, because that's when I was in law school and we came down and y'all had a big old fish fry to celebrate protection of the islands that Jimmy Chandler worked for. And I remember it was the first time I ever heard you speak, and I was mesmerized because the language of the Gullah Geechee is so beautiful and powerful, and I just have been a fan of yours ever since. And being able to do what you said, I think really well, is there's these grassroots efforts, and but sometimes you need the law to come in. And so it's been, I've really enjoyed getting to know you and your community and work with y'all, and are looking forward to talking a little bit more about that's been like over the past several years.
It's wonderful you mentioned that, because you know y'all, everybody wants to come in and eat our food. So I wasn't quite sure if Amy really liked working with me or it was them fish fries, because she can put it down. All right. So we've been to fish fries, we've had celebratory oyster rolls, we've been at all kinds of good seafood things, and it makes sense, right? Because we're fighting for the coast. And here it is, we call it SCELP, which almost sounds like a seashell or something, but it's South Carolina Environmental Law Project. Why that name, and what is that? What do you all really do?
Right. Well, so the South Carolina Environmental Law Project was named that because it was really envisioned to be a short-term project, something that was born out of the Energy Research Foundation that was doing a lot of work on nuclear issues in the state. And when Jimmy started SCELP, he thought, well, there are a few bad decisions that are being made. I'm going to bring a couple of lawsuits, and we're going to straighten this all out. We're going to get the state on the right track, making good decisions. And well, because of exactly what you said about the vision behind you, people wanting to come to the coast, the need to use the environmental laws as tools to protect our coastal resources has only grown, because more and more people be finding about how great it is to live in South Carolina on the coast, and they want to come here, and that just means that there are more and more development pressures. And so we work throughout the whole state of South Carolina, and we work on a lot of different issues, from things like citing landfills and mines and making sure that they're not going to be cited. Really, we just don't need any more landfills.
Right. Yeah, right.
That's a problem. We don't want out-of-state waste, and we don't need it coming here. So fighting off projects like that. We also do a lot of beachfront management work, where we're trying to prevent hard erosion control structures from being on the beach, being built on the beach, and generally trying to get people to think about retreating from the beach. Because I think, another thing you said in your opening that I love is that the Gullah Geechee people walk to the water. They don't build on the water. Absolutely. And that is really the way that makes the most sense. And so I think that y'all are a beautiful example of how we live with nature, and how we feed each other from nature, and how we really need to respect and treat the coast. And so a lot of our work is trying to use the legal tools to do that, to protect from inappropriate development encroaching too into sensitive areas, into wetland areas that are flood buffers, into important habitats that are needed for nursery and breeding grounds for all the seafood that you and I love eating together.
Exactly. Right.
Our work kind of runs a gamut, but we want to be there to support communities that are trying to protect themselves, their quality of life, their way of life, and the natural environment. And y'all have done a lot of work on climate change too, and you've been an excellent spokesperson on that front, Queen. And I think that now it's so critical that we incorporate what we know is happening to our planet into future land use decisions.
Yes.
And I think you mentioned Bay Point, and I'll let you take it from there.
Yeah, because one of the things I wanted to dovetail on was something you said about your work, though, is trying to protect the coast from the things that shouldn't be here as we go forward with planning. Because many people don't realize that there are so many levels to law, right? So when we're talking about the planning departments that we have to deal with and having to work with them and try to restructure comprehensive plans and zoning ordinances so that they're not harmful to the coast, then dealing with state entities when we're talking about setbacks and buffer zones and even redrawing the line along the Atlantic coast to say where people can build up to and not any further. And then having people push back saying, but I have that property and I want my house there and I already planned a dock. And then having to even fight to change the laws for the length of docks that came out of that SOS, to have DHEC work with us in South Carolina and shorten the allowable length for bridges and piers, which is what a dock is still considered to be, because it's partially the same thing and it's kind of the same engineering that goes into it. So people come to our shorelines and they just go, oh, like you said, oh, it's so pretty. Oh, look at the paradise. Oh, I want to stay. I don't want to just eat the seafood and go home. We don't mind y'all eat the seafood and go home. But they come and go, oh, but I'd love to live here. But how about living here in balance with the coastal community? And that includes the people and the creatures in the water that you mentioned. Because when we talk about the dock laws that we got changed, that dealt with algae, algal blooms, other things that happen because of shading. And so wherein people cannot really realize how valuable it is for the sun to be shining directly on different portions of the water, but creatures in the water to continue to be in those bodies of water. So the more of those docks we get, the worse that gets. Then people don't realize that with the docks, and we're in a hurricane zone, that when those docks get damaged and destroyed, the people who want them so badly don't take credit for owning them when they're broken and they're in the water, and now they're causing a boating hazard, especially for native Gullah Geechee fishing folks. And so we have so much appreciated all the work you've done with the Gullah Geechee Sea Island Coalition over the years on those issues, but also the current work that not only involves Bay Point, which is fishing ground for us, a traditional fishing ground right here off of St. Helena Island in Beaufort County, South Carolina, as we say, South Kakalaki and things like that. But you've also worked with the Gullah Geechee Fishing Association on a lawsuit to stop seismic gun testing, and we've been working, all of us up and down the coast as environmental activists and advocates, to stop the offshore drilling from ever happening in the Atlantic Ocean. So why don't you give us an update on where is that lawsuit at this point? Have you heard anything? And then tell us about what the situation is going between a situation with Bay Point, where we're at the local level dealing with planning, dealing with a planning office, dealing with a board of zoning appeal, so it hasn't elevated or escalated up the ladder, but then getting to a point where we do have to go up the ladder and we have to deal with some federal things, and you have to file against certain things and get injunctions and other things filed to try to stop something like that. Why don't you tell us an update on the seismic guns and the offshore drilling, and then back down here on the islands about this Bay Point issue and where y'all stand with that at SCELP?
Yeah, sure. I'm glad to. And it's been really exciting for me to see what's happened with the seismic testing and offshore drilling because, environmental issues in South Carolina are difficult because we've got so many decision makers that don't want to tell somebody that they can't do something with their property.
Right, absolutely,
And
because they consider it takings, yeah.
Yeah, and so it's really, there's this anti-regulatory sentiment
attitude
in the
and
state.
behavior. Yeah, absolutely.
And so we're always fighting an uphill battle in South Carolina for environmental protection. The odds are usually stacked against us. And so what's so exciting to me about
on Up Creek battle, because we in the low country, so everything flats on Up Creek battle, going against the tide,
paddling against the tide with only one arm, with only one paddle, and not an engine that don't work, and so we got some problems with environmental issues all around in the state. But I think what was exciting to me about, or what has been exciting to me about the offshore drilling issue is that we have coalesced as a state on an environmental issue where there is broad consensus that this is not what we want. And so to me, it's inspiring because I see opportunities to bring in other voices and on other environmental issues aside from this, so that we can really advance conservation, adaptation, sustainability more broadly. And I think this is just a really good example of how we can really, when people really put their minds towards that grassroots advocacy and education, that we can really, change hearts and minds. And that's happened in the state, to be able to get the Attorney General, Alan Wilson, to join into our lawsuit. So getting right into the lawsuit, you mentioned different layers of approval, like the local level, the state level, and the federal level. Well, where we are right now with the seismic testing and offshore drilling is that the federal government, the NOAA, which is
National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration.
Right. Yeah. And they're the National
Just in case
Marine.
somebody thought that you got biblical for a minute, I just wanted to make sure my audience realized you wasn't about to preach that time. Go ahead.
Nobody look for an ark here.
Right. It's not that bad. The flooding issue is not that bad, thank God.
Thank God. Yeah. Right. So the National Marine Fisheries Service issued what we call incidental harassment authorizations, or IHAs. And they issued these IHAs that allow 5 separate seismic testing companies to conduct these air gun blast surveys in the ocean. And what the incidental harassment authorizations do, as you might have presumed from the name of those authorizations, is that they allow harassment of marine species.
Right.
They allow harassment and harm to thousands of species of marine life, from sea turtles and fish, plankton that are the base of the food chain, all the way up to dolphins, whales, the Atlantic right whale, which is an endangered species, and everything in between. Everything in the ocean would be really harmed because marine life depends on sound for nearly everything they do.
Absolutely.
From finding mates, to feeding, to finding shelter, navigating, communicating with each other. And so these authorizations would disrupt those marine species in a really dramatic way. And so we challenged those 5 IHA decisions in federal court in Charleston. We fought, we really wanted to make sure we brought it in Charleston because we wanted the case to be in South Carolina, because South Carolina has really been the spearhead and leader in that. And the coalition and the Fishing Association being part of that has been really added more, of course, power to the overall movement. And so we the other thing that the seismic companies need, and in addition to those IHAs or incidental harassment authorizations, is they need to have the actual permit from BOEM, the Bureau of Ocean and Energy Management.
Mm-hmm.
So the IHAs were issued in November of 2018, and they're only valid for 2 years.
Ah, okay.
And they cannot proceed until they actually have the BOEM permits, which have not been issued yet. Okay. Which means that in November, December of this year, if they don't have their BOEM permits, they can't
do it. They can't harass the creatures and harass us. Right.
Right. Right. And so that's a good thing. And where we are right now, if you look at what's been filed in court, in federal court, it's been a lot of arguments over what materials the National Marine Fisheries Service has to provide as part of its decision-making process. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so we've been fighting over, we've been saying that they are not giving us everything that they need to give us so that we can understand what the basis was for their decision to issue these authorizations.
Right, full disclosure. As part of discovery, full disclosure, right?
Right. So we're fighting over that, and until that issue of what all documents are in what we call the administrative record, mm-hmm. that we will get to review and look at and help us in crafting our arguments. Right. Until that is all complete, we won't even get to the part where the judge gets to hear the case. Mm-hmm. And so things are moving along. Things are moving along slowly, but I think that that's honestly to our advantage.
Yes.
Because without BOEM having issued the permits, they don't have all the authorizations, and the authorizations they do have expire at the end of the year. And so it doesn't by any means close the book on efforts to do offshore drilling, as you know, but we're feeling pretty good. We did get a bit of bad news on Monday, which I don't know if you're aware of it, but the state has a limited role in approving the authorizations, and the state, whereas in 2015 they granted state approval for the seismic testing, they denied it for a more recent application for Western Gecko, who is one of the defendants in our lawsuit that we have, Queen. Yeah. And so DHEC denied the state certification, and we found out on Monday that the Secretary of Interior overrode the DHEC decision.
Are you kidding me? I didn't even know he had the authority to do that, to override their decision for the state.
There is a provision in federal law where the secretary can override a DHEC decision. It is appealable, and so we right now are doing research to figure out what grounds we would have for an appeal, and thinking strategically whether it makes sense to file another lawsuit. And so we're working through that right now, because I think we just want to keep hitting hard.
Gotta keep hitting. Keep hitting. Yeah, I'm with you. That's how you win the fight. Gotta keep hitting. The bell hasn't rung. It's not over. Yeah. So now round 2 is Bay Point. Yeah. So we're coming down out of the federal, reaching into the state now and overriding something. Let's be in the state, and let's come to my home county, Beaufort County, Bay Point. Right now, we're at a situation where we have almost 15,000 signatures on our change.org petition that says stop destruction at Bay Point. That is a blessing. And I want to say thank you to all the 100 children who are watching and things like that. Would unsign them. Please keep signing it, keep sharing it. We're going to get it to 20,000 before the Board of Zoning Appeal hears this. For those who haven't kept up, you can go to GullahGeecheeNation.com, GullahGeecheeNation.com, and you can type in Bay Point in our search engine, and you'll see the different blogs we've put out there as well. And if you go to the change petition, we've kept you updated over this process of a project that attempted to be built over a decade ago in Beaufort County. They attempted to basically take what's more or less a hummock or a little sand spit that's out here between Hilton Head and St. Helena Island and Paris Island, and get it annexed into the town of Hilton Head so they could build a resort. Hilton Head didn't want it. Now, if Hilton Head don't want a resort, that should speak loudly to everybody. There's something awry here. Port Royal rejected it as well. They didn't want to annex it into their town either. And so now the community has said over and over, and if you watch Gullah Geechee TV, go to gullahgeechee.tv, GullahGeechee.tv, and look up Queen Quet, Bay Point, or Bay Point protest. You'll see the video of when they did a community hearing. People were not in agreement with a project that is a resort that's being marketed to try to get it through planning as ecotourism. So now, herein comes where we have to try to do something that even allows the community voice, the native Gullah Geechees who've been here for hundreds of years. We've been fishing that area. Our Gullah Geechee Fishing Association members told me to go to that meeting and raise Cain, and they didn't say it as nice as I'm saying it. All right. And I went there and presented at that time the thousands of signatures we'd gotten in 1 week. So if we now have just about 15,000 people saying this is no good, we have numerous environmental organizations up and down the coast of South Carolina saying don't do it. It's no good. We oppose it. What's the next step? What is it that SCELP's doing in regard to this? Are y'all still in opposition? And if so, what can you do to help with this?
Mm-hmm. Oh, we're absolutely in opposition. I mean, this is just the poster child of a terrible place to build, right? Because as you know, and your people know very well, and anybody who's been out in Port Royal Sound and boated around there knows that is a piece of moving sand. It's constantly changing. It's very dynamic. It's the front beach is a boneyard beach. I mean, there are trees in the water. It's very erosional. It's very dynamic. It is a terrible place to build. And not only would it have, I mean, it would put people in harm's way in addition to harming historical and cultural resources. Right. So there are so many problems with it. We can't even enumerate all of them. I mean, horseshoe crabs come up there and lay their eggs by the thousands. We have, it's an IBA, it's an international birding area by Audubon. You know, I mean, how many different groups have to come together to show you something that should be as clear as this picture behind me, that's not the spot. Leave it as pristine as you see it now and let it keep shifting and let it be as dynamic as it is on its own. These people have said that if they put 50 units there, Amy, now you help me out. They are going to build 50 units on there, but they said, we're not going to disturb anything. We're not going to build any roads. Yeah. How is that possible? Right.
Yeah, right.
So you're you're right. I mean, it's just not possible. I mean, there's a lot of infrastructure that goes into it. There's a lot of destruction. I mean, it's just unavoidable. And there's just some things that are too sacred and precious to let be destroyed by man's hand. You know, God created it like that, and some things should stay in their natural state, and this is certainly one of them. And you're exactly right about this sort of pulling a fast one on the county, trying to make it sound like it's an eco tourist resort when we all know that that's really not what's going on here, because having looked at some of the plans and the videos and some of what they're proposing, this thing is not designed to immerse people in nature and a very natural experience. You would do that by taking people out in kayaks for a day, go visit and walk around, but have very, very little imprint on the habitat. And so there are a couple of things that we are planning and thinking about, and one of them, of course, is the next step, which is the special use permit. So now that the county, as folks may know, the county initially said, oh, this doesn't meet the definition of ecotourism.
Exactly.
Well, they went out.
Because that's a natural preserve. It's listed as natural preserve in the Beaufort County Zoning Standards Ordinance.
Yeah. And the developers went and spent a lot of money trying to persuade the county to change its position, which it did. And now that it's deemed ecotourism, they can apply for that special use permit. And so we are planning, we've been watching, following, waiting to see when that public hearing is going to be held. Of course, we'll speak out against the special use permit, and then those decisions are always something that you can challenge in circuit court. And so that's where I think we would head next, is challenging the issuance, if they do issue it. I mean, it'd be great. We want them to deny it.
To deny it, right? Absolutely, absolutely.
So hopefully I think getting a lot of people to be able to participate and submit letters, and of course the 15,000 petition. Those are all things that are that need to be presented, and would try to get it denied. I think if it doesn't, then certainly appealing that decision would be the next step. And then you also mentioned, the different layers. So we're at the very, very basic level now, which is at the local government level, and that's always where we want people to start, because that's usually where the people that live in that community have the most sway with the decision makers, because you elect them. Exactly. And so it's really important to make sure that the people's voices are heard, and if there's going to be a decision that a positive decision, it's going to come because of the people.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But then if that fails, they're still going to have to go through and get some permits from the state and probably the federal government. And the good thing is, you alluded to some of the rules earlier on docks and some of the things that came out of the work to protect the small hummock islands down in St. Helena. We have some really good laws in South Carolina. We have some good coastal protection laws. The Coastal Zone Management Act in South Carolina has some really valuable tools, and we've gone to court all the way up to the South Carolina Supreme Court quite a number of times, between me and Jimmy, getting really valuable precedent established for protecting coastal resources. And so we feel like this is definitely one that we would advocate very strongly for denial of the permits, and would challenge any permits that would get issued. So and I think the best example I can give you of how this could play out is our ongoing decade-long battle to protect Captain Sam Spit on Jules Island
in Charleston County.
In Charleston County. It's a very similar situation in that it's a barrier island. It's surrounded by water. It's very dynamic and vulnerable. They've got both of them. Neither of them have any development on them. I would argue that Bay Point is even more precarious because because of where it's located in Port Royal Sound. And so we've been able to successfully fend that off. I like when we don't have to be in legal battles for a decade, Queen, because it's a lot of work. But sometimes it's the only way that we're able to protect special places like this.
Absolutely. And I'm so happy that you said that spiritual things like this, sacred things like this, and you mentioned protecting the resource. And we're just appreciative of the work SCELP has done to really appreciate that Gullah Geechee cultural heritage traditions are a resource to this coast and that they need to be sustained. So we appreciate all the partnerships, all the collaboration, the hours and hours of work that you've done, even sending us things to read and let us read through it and send it back to you and back and forth and keeping each other in the loop and really being a part of a real circle where we're working together, united, to make sure that our quality of life here and the quality of life of the creatures in our waterways remains for the future generations. Like you said, there are some things that man's hands don't need to change. God has already made it sacred, and it's a blessing to have it. And so all of you who definitely want to keep up with more of what we're doing and how these cases are coming out, you can follow SCELP, SCELP.org. Go to their website. You can also find how to connect to them on social media there. You can follow the Gullah Geechee Sea Island Coalition and become a member. Go to gullahgeechee.net and you can pay for membership at gullahgeechee.biz. And then if you just overall want to keep up with what are going on down your pun we course and things like that, so Hannah can zoom in even more with we and things like that and see what's going on, follow gullahgeecheenation.com. gullahgeecheenation.com. And when you spell it, again, GULLAHGEECHEE. Ain't a no I in Geechee if it a we. And so definitely, Amy, any closing words as we kind of move on out and hopefully we get to flow on out here to the shoreline and enjoy this beautiful day that's not overbearing with heat, but has a nice breeze here on our coast. Any closing words for the audience?
I can't wait to be out on that coast with you sometime soon. And I thanks for everyone's attention. And I also just want to say thanks to you, Queen, for really, helping educate us all and bringing the Gullah Geechee Nation more into a visible presence and introducing me and bringing us in. It's really been a wonderful experience for me to reconnect with you and learn more about your people and your culture. And it's really, especially with Bay Point, such a powerful indicator. Yeah. And I'm glad that we're able to be a partner and do this work, and appreciate everyone's support.
Yes, thank you, Amy. I really always enjoy working with you and enjoy even more our celebrations of victory. And we got some more of those coming. Yes. With all of these that we fighting to win, and we don't fight to lose, all right? And one of the things I want to tell you about, and I know, Amy, the last time you and I did get together was just before Rona decided to run around, all right, is we were there in Georgetown, and you came out to our Gullah Geechee Family Day there at the Gullah Museum in Georgetown. We had a wonderful time, and you purchased some of my new books. And I wanted people to know that tomorrow, if they watch gullahgeechee.tv, if you watch it, there will be a premiere of me reading from one of my books about one of the creatures Amy mentioned, our turtles. Our loggerhead turtles. And we have a new book called The Sandman's Daughter that I wrote along with Robin Carter, who used to live in Georgetown County. She used to live at Devereux at one point. She was one of those turtle watchers. She was one of those people that got into the environment and was inspired about Gullah Geechee culture, much like what you're saying, Amy. And that led her to want to write this intercultural book for children. And so every summer, for the past 20 years, I've been part of the Colleton County Memorial Library Summer Reading Program. And so unfortunately, we won't celebrate my 20th anniversary in person this year, but they sent out a wonderful video. If y'all go to Gullah Geechee Nation on Facebook, or follow at Gullah Geechee on Twitter or Instagram, you can see the wonderful video they put together today of Sister Sheila and I, the children's librarian, reading a different book together, but also then tomorrow, they will premiere my presentation for this 20th anniversary celebration. And that will be me sharing from the Sandman's Daughter about this coast and wanting to get children to fall in love with our coast the way Amy and I love it. And they'll be the ones in the future that when Amy and I can just sit out here and drink us some sweet tea on the piazza and just enjoy the coastline, that they can go ahead and be the ones out here fighting for it and knowing why they fight for it. Why are these creatures so sacred to us? Why is this earth so sacred to us? And I always say to people, if you take care of Mother Earth, she'll take care of us. So Hunter must take care of the root for to heal the truth. We thank SCELP for helping us with tools to dig a little deeper into our coastline. So thank you everybody for zooming in. This for episode 3. I'm glad he's gonna join me, and we're gonna have another show for you next Wednesday at 3. Thank you over there at University of Minnesota, our CREATE program, for helping us go through with all of this. And we're all part of the Gullah Geechee Sustainability Think Tank, and that's why we want to help you zoom in on sustainability. Everybody stay healthy, stay safe, and be blessed. Enjoy the environment. That's the best thing we can do right now. Get your immune systems up. What else would you get if you breathe in this type of beautiful, clean air? All right. Peace to everybody out there. Have a good one.